Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Max Spoilers by MinnMax on God of War Valhalla, the DLC that released unexpectedly late 2023 and kind of blew us all away with the fact that there was actually a whole lot of story in there, and there are things to talk about, and it's worth doing a Max Spoilers. My name is Jacob Geller. I will be your host. I am joined by Kyle Hilliard.
Hello, Jacob. Hello.
Hello, Kyle. And also, friend of MinnMax, Ross Fund. Hello, Ross.
Hello. Greetings.
If you are listening to this on YouTube and you're thinking, gosh, why do I have to have this YouTube app open? Good news, you don't. If you join the MinnMax Patreon, you can get this as a podcast in your podcast feed, along with a whole bunch of other stuff we're doing there. Our newly titled bonus pod, a bonus podcast every week, will also be in that feed. And all sorts of other stuff. Also, right at the top, this is called Max Spoilers. We are going to be spoiling God of War Valhalla. We will also be spoiling God of War Ragnarok. And I assume the old God of Wars too. So if there is an element of God of War that you don't want spoiled, maybe steer clear of this one, because it's kind of a whole series thing, which I'm really excited to talk about. How much had y'all heard about this before starting? Because I just basically heard it's more than you think, and then I started playing it.
I think it was like from you actually. Like I don't remember if we were on the MinnMax show or if it was like end of the year discussions, and you were kind of talking about it being like having a great moment. And I think Ben was also surprised by it. Like I thought it was just like, oh okay, a roguelike mode added to Valhalla. Like a version of the one that was already there, and it was it was in the 2018 game, because there was like a roguelike that I never really touched. I think I went through like once and I was like, this is fine, I don't really need to mess with this. But once I heard that there was like legitimate story stuff in there, I was like, oh well, I'm legally required to play now because I'm very invested in that story and I want to know what's happening next.
As somebody who loved God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, and then also loves roguelites and Hades especially, I was going to try this out, but then the general reaction seemed to be, hey, this is actually pretty awesome, and there are important story things happening there, so that kind of made me feel like I had to jump on it sooner rather than later.
It is a weird Sony thing that giant quadruple A games are being given roguelike DLC modes, because we are just on the eve of The Last of Us 2 also getting a roguelike story mode. But that one, I can't imagine will have any canonical story events in it. No. But this it was like at the Game Awards or something, there was kind of a big trailer where I think everyone was like, what is this? And then Kratos entered the frame and we were like, oh, he's doing something.
I didn't think we'd be hearing from him or that team for a while. Really, I like written them off as like, oh, they're got their heads down working on stuff. I didn't expect anything new.
Yeah. So the setup of this game is that it is after the events of Ragnarok, and it seems to be significantly after, like maybe not years, but like a couple months, at least. Like time has gone by. And Kratos has received a mysterious invitation that invites him to a rocky island called Valhalla. And so he goes out there. He's got Mimir. Mimir is kind of concerned. And something that I love right away that I feel like is easy to forget after all of this is when he goes, there are these giant open doors, or these giant closed doors, and he just forces them open and pushes his way through. And then the game is kind of like, that was a bad thing to do, because that first run, you're just like taking damage the whole time.
So
I did miss that,
Yeah, I love that once Freya and company show up, they're like, how did you even get in there? And he's like, I just grabbed the doors and opened them. And they're like, oh, why would you do that?
Yeah, got in the big, dumb, stupid way.
Yeah.
But as you start getting into this, it turns out that Valhalla, which is a roguelike and kind of just a series of combat rooms, is like drawn from the memories of the person in it. So it's not like it looks like this for everyone, but for Kratos, it is this very kind of abstract, connected series of places that in the first big twist of this, turns out to include old God of War stuff. That it is not simply from the Norse side of God of War. It like really heavily has to do with the Greek stuff. What was like the big early moment for y'all? Because I have a couple.
I mean, the big singular thing for me was like, who is the sun god whose head you removed in God of War 3? What's
Helios, right?
Helios.
It wasn't even so much him appearing, or that it was like, oh, I'm in a Greek setting, as much as it was like, you play out that sequence from the original God of War where you have to sacrifice. I don't think it's even a soldier. I think it's just like a civilian guy in a cage, if I remember correctly. To progress. And I mean, 2018 and Ragnarok are all about reevaluating the events of those first 3 games, or 5 games, I guess you could say, in a way. So the fact that they were like actively doing one of the most like weirdly iconic but evil moments from the first God of War was, I was just like, oh, we're like, not that this game is afraid to dig into Kratos' past, at least like emotionally and in discussion, but the fact that it was actually like playing out this moment from the original game, I was like, this is interesting. I want to keep going with this and see where this is going.
And the fact that it's like that they had the enemy types from the, was like really, I was like, oh, they really went all in on this. They are recreating the feel of those games. Yeah.
And like Kyle says, Kratos' shame over his actions of the original God of War is a huge part of 2018 and Ragnarok. But there's just like, when it becomes like a literalized thing and you're literally in the old situations, it's like it takes on a lot of extra power, I think.
Yeah, totally. And then also the switch back to Mimir, when you have the head in there, just makes it all the more like scary and evil, and even like you can't help but feel like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? You can't put Mimir in there. What are you doing?
Yeah, like you guys, did you guys have the feeling when that first shows up and he makes the wrong choice to start with? Did you have the feeling that he was doing the wrong thing? When you're like, because he thinks he's putting Helios's head in there, and I don't know, he's so slow and deliberate about it. It gives you a lot of time to be like, oh, I don't think this is the right move, dude.
Well, yeah, it's very much like we are not this Kratos. Like we don't do this kind of thing anymore.
The Helios inclusion just made me so happy, because it's like there are a lot of gods in the original series who all have very kind of interesting and iconic personalities. But I thought that it was so weird that like through 2018 and Ragnarok, it was just another game where Kratos had a head dangling from his belt, that like in the first couple games it's Medusa, and then in the third game it's Helios, and then it's Mimir. And there was probably some line of incidental dialogue about it, but it had like not really been acknowledged. And the Helios death is so visceral on a level that like still today I'm like maybe one of the gnarliest kills in a video game. That like bringing him back, I thought was just such a perfect, like, if we want to take Kratos right back to kind of his emotional state in the old God of Wars, this feels like the perfect pick, the perfect inclusion.
Yeah, all that dialogue for Helios was really well done too. He's just so bitter and so salty about it.
Yeah, like there's also just the irony of like, oh, it's the other like beheaded character. It's like, yeah, of course, who else would it be? Because Medusa doesn't really have a character. Helios at least has like a personality.
And I like the fact that like, as part of the combat, you kind of need someone yelling out like, hey, there's people behind you. And they recorded those lines with Helios, but like he's a real asshole about it, where he's still telling you you're about to get hit from behind, but not in a nice way.
It's fun.
A big moment for me early on was, I think, even before you explicitly like get into Greece or see Helios, is you can look off in the sky and you can see the three judges up there, which are like such a strange part of God of War 3 that they just kind of, there are these big statues and there's just chain, and the chain is like a hugely important part of the God of War 3 story for some reason.
Yeah.
And so like my favorite part of 2018 probably was when you were rowing back to your cabin to get the blades, and just Athena shows up, and you like they really hadn't acknowledged the previous games until then. And so like
yeah.
I'm such a sucker for, I love those old games so much that like I really can be just like excited by any reference. But like that specific reference, and then the fact that you like go there and they play, you know, a kind of major part in the progression of it. I like that it's not just, oh, here's the Colossus of Rhodes, here's, you know, kind of like the most iconic things. They're pulling weird parts from each of the old games.
Yeah, and they're relevant too, which is important, right? Like it's like your example of like Athena, like the reason that scene is so good isn't because you're like, oh look, God of War, the original. It's like she has something important to say to him in that moment.
Yes.
And I feel like this DLC does a good job with that too. Is like they don't just have a bunch of original God of War stuff just for the sake of being able to have a reference. Like it's all relevant and interesting, and it does make you sort of see how far Kratos has come, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I am the type of person who just loves to see a thing and recognize the thing and point at the thing and be like, I recognize that. But like you're saying, it's all included very thoughtfully.
Yes.
And the other part that I think works so well in this game with a roguelite storytelling is usually like parsed out like very slowly, right? You get a little dialogue here, and then you make a little further, and you get a little dialogue here and here. And that works just perfectly for Kratos' character, because he's like, I will say 2 sentences about something, and then like I need to fight a bunch more things before I'm ready to talk about it again. And so it just like it's a perfect fit for the type of gameplay that you go through in a roguelite.
Yeah.
So there, and I think it is not just through its historical era, but like Hades seems to be the real, you know, if you wanted to point at a roguelike that it is trying to emulate, Hades seems like the one, because not only are you going to Greece and, you know, fighting things with spears and such, but like every time you die, you go back to a hub area, and there are kind of new elements of conversations that you can have with a number of characters, and you are gradually upgrading. You know, you can make your health better and make yourself stronger and whatever. How did this stuff with Freya and the Valkyries and everything land for y'all?
It's a good hook for Freya early on to be like, have you thought about that thing we talked about? Do you want to do it? And him being like, I'm not sure, let me get back to you, was such like a small, simple thing to make me be like, what are they talking about? What is it? To the point where like I inflated it in my head too much. Like I was like, what could it possibly be? And then when she was like, I want you to be like the new God of War, I was like, oh, well, yeah, I guess that makes perfect sense. Like, like that, like, yeah, I guess it makes sense that she would. I thought maybe they were like, and to be clear, like, I actually don't want this from the game. I don't. Freya and Kratos, like, you can't help but sort of imply romance between them by the end of Ragnarok because of just how much time they spend together and they start getting along so well. But like, I mean, if I'm thinking about it broadly, like it would be absurd for them to ever be romantic because he literally killed her child, and no matter what, you know, resolution they reach and like continue to work together, like that's not something she can ever forgive him for. But in my head, and I was like building it up, I was like, is she does she like want to get married? Does she want to have a kid? Is that what she asked him? And then it was like the second she was like, will you be the God of War? I was like, oh yeah, that makes so much more sense than where my head was going.
Yeah, I don't know. I assume that there are Kratos and Athena shippers out there, or I'm sorry,
Freya,
Kratos and
yeah.
Freya shippers out there, and yeah, that was definitely it's definitely so vague as to tease you about what the question is. I do like that the those two characters have such a long relationship now in these last two games that this game starts off with an argument between the two of them, but it's not like they're back to square one. It's like they still have that base level of respect for each other, which I thought was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea of square one is actually kind of interesting with these past couple God of War games, because it's like in each of them, it's like, 2018 and Ragnarok and this are kind of stories about Kratos getting better. And it is interesting. Like by the end of this one, I was like, oh, they are really kind of Kyle, I think you're a big BoJack Horseman fan.
Yeah.
Right
like
about
BoJack
that.
Horseman.
Ross,
Yeah.
do you watch BoJack
No,
Horseman?
I haven't seen it.
I didn't expect you to bring up BoJack Horseman. So
I just think I love that show. One of the challenges of the show is it's 6 seasons long, and they keep needing to find him ways to kind of get better at the end of a season, but then still keep having a show. And so then he has to kind of get worse again. And I did think a little, I was like, man, I really feel like Kratos kind of self-actualized at the end of Ragnarok. And then this one, it's like, no, but you haven't addressed this. And this is still this like lurking part of your psyche.
I totally agree. This really felt like the final resolution of Kratos' internal conflicts. And it left me wondering where the series is going to go next. Is it like does it feel like Kratos is done because he's taking this, permanent job here in the Norse mythology to help, govern essentially. And in kind of the post game of this, there's a few different like short conversations you can have with Sigrun, where like Mimir will say, "Hey, what's going on in this realm?" And she'll be like, "Hey, well, the light elves and the dark elves are still kind of fighting a little bit, but things are going pretty good." And that's like the general vibe of all of those comments. So it feels like everything in Asgard is resolved, and yet Kratos is going to be staying in Asgard, which really makes me think if like the next main game is going to be only Atreus, or what it's going to do. How did that land with you guys?
gosh, yeah, I because that's like a thought I've been having since Ragnarok concluded. It's like, where do we go next? Do I really need to spend more time with Kratos? Ultimately, I mean, I've spent so much time with him at this point, and like he's reached a nice conclusion. Are we looking at an Atreus game yet? Is Sony Santa Monica just going to do something completely different outside of the God of War series moving forward? And this still leaves me in that state of like, I don't know what I want. I don't know that I want like an Atreus game necessarily. Maybe. I mean, he's cool. I like Atreus, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, it really felt like the end of Ragnarok was so much of a like, good job, Kratos, you did it. On to, the next generation. And so I guess it's like I kind of picture, it starts as an Atreus game, but then, he needs help, and then Kratos, like crashes into the story or something. But yeah, it is hard to know. And I think one of the, the true skills of this DLC is like, to make me believe that Kratos still had to resolve some stuff, after he like weeps at the painting of himself at the end of Ragnarok. And I was like, that's it, Kratos is done, but like giving him more places to go, to help him on that journey. The final boss of this game was also really interesting, because it's Tyr, and you have to fight Tyr several times, which is something that you spend more time with actual Tyr here than you do in Ragnarok, because the whole time in Ragnarok he's secretly Odin, and so you almost never get to meet the real guy. And I really liked it. I liked his characterization quite a bit.
Yeah, I guess we should point out, if you're just watching this without intention to play, the mysterious invite to go to Valhalla was from Tyr, right? Yes. Wasn't it? Yeah, mm-hmm. Basically, it was like he's inviting Kratos to a therapy session. Kind of like, yeah. But yeah, no, I like Tyr a lot, and it's funny in Ragnarok because I liked Tyr so much that at a certain point in the game you learn, that technically wasn't Tyr the whole time, but it was his personality.
Right.
Kind of. It's
Yeah.
like, so that was basically Tyr. And yeah, you can find the real Tyr in Ragnarok, but it's fully optional. So yeah, this is like the most time you spend with true Tyr. And it's cool. It's fun. He can be challenging, and like, because you have to fight him a couple times, and I always appreciate when you do beat him, the conclusion to the fight is rather than, you know, Kratos jamming his thumbs into someone's eye sockets and ripping off their head, Tyr basically grabs his fist. He's like, "We're good. That's good. We did it." You know, it's like, that's fun.
I did love that every fight with Tyr, if you win, ends with Kratos picking him up and giving him John Cena's finishing move, the attitude adjustment.
Kratos, what is that? That's the John Cena thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. The repeated fights with Tyr were super fun, I thought. And I love that he comes out with a weapon from a different mythological culture over and over again. I had to look up a couple of those because obviously you recognize a katana from Japan, and then there's the khopesh from Egypt, but there was the giant club, which is like, I had to look up, is a Mesoamerican weapon, like from Mayan and or Aztec culture.
That's cool. I don't think I clocked that every time.
Yeah, and I really love that as kind of the, you know, the Kratos joke of like, okay, which mythology's gods is he going to kill this time? And kind of like Assassin's Creeds have done, where they kind of tease like, hey, maybe it'll be one of these settings for the next game. Just acknowledging like, yes, Egypt and Japan and Mesoamerica, like they all exist in some version of this world. Like those dimensions are somewhere that can be accessed.
Yeah.
How did y'all find the the challenge of the game?
I put it on, there were like 4 difficulties, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I put it on like the second level, like just the straight ahead, like normal. Because like I am not looking to be challenged too much. I don't want it to be too easy, but I also don't want to pull my hair out. And that last fight with Tyr, I think I ended up doing it 2 or 3 times, maybe. But overall, I never hit any brick walls, which I was satisfied with. That's kind of what I wanted from the challenge level. So I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I also started out with the recommended starting difficulty, which is that same one, like normal. And I could have bumped it up at one point because I ended up feeling like I was winning a little too often. But, you know, I also like that feeling of being extremely powerful, like I'm doing a great job here.
Yeah.
So, I didn't run into any brick walls. There was a couple of losses I took against like one of the mid-level enemies. Maybe it's like a griffin or something, because I kind of had forgotten since playing Ragnarok of like the strategy that you need to use to kill it, and it's a pretty early game enemy, so that ended up being tough. Did you guys hit any other brick walls anywhere?
I mean, for me, it was, and I generally, I started this on normal and then bumped it up to hard and then ultimately bumped it back down to normal because of the last Tyr fight where I don't remember, maybe he's using all the weapons or maybe it's just like, I can't remember exactly what it is, but like what I really liked about the difficulty in Ragnarok was like, it would be really hard, but I would just like repeat them over and over and over and learn all their attacks. And then it'd be like, great, I know them. And the thing about a roguelike is you don't get to do that. And so it was like, I was kind of having no difficulty getting to Tyr, and then I would get him and I would die very quickly and be like, I have to play another like 35 minutes just to have the chance to fight him again.
Yeah.
And so I took it down. But that being said, I think for a combat system not designed for a roguelike mode, I think they made some really kind of cool and interesting choices in terms of like how they gave you the upgrade system. So again, it almost felt like Hades, where basically I would be like, okay, this is my spear run, or these are my blades run, where like all of the power-ups you would get would be going to one weapon. And sometimes like a very specific aspect of that weapon, like I'm just going to be trying to like set people on fire this time because I have a lot of bonuses that are going to kick in if someone's on fire, or like using the spear and like stealing their element. And I was like, it eventually, at the end, I was like, okay, I think I'm good with this. But like, I played a good probably 6-7 hours of it, and like was pretty impressed by like how long it maintained that novelty.
Yeah, that was probably about 4, I think, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, I ended up doing about a dozen runs, I think. So that's probably maybe a little longer than 6-7 hours. But I ended up loving that spear in this game. In the normal games, I tend to just like stick with the axe, throwing it at people, and then just swap in the other weapons to do the runic attacks quickly. One of the fun parts about a rogue though is like I think encouraging you to try other weapons and other combinations of things. So I appreciated having an incentive to do more spear stuff and do the blades more. But yeah, the spear thing, like I feel like the game gives you a nice bunch of perks that kind of play well together. And especially for the spear, if you start doing like the running attack perks, like all of a sudden you run and attack one enemy and there's like 4 different bonuses stacking, and it feels great. So I really got into that spear.
Yeah, I didn't in the main game. Jacob, we might be similar in this. I think we've talked about it a few times, but like I really don't engage with the stat minutia too much. Where like I'm just not that interested in like breaking the game down into like specifics. So like I just want to get really good at using the axe. Like that's kind of like my approach, you know. So it was, you know, both like against my will, but nice that in this mode you're kind of pushed to be like, no, pay attention to these things and try different things and you'll have more success. And it was kind of nice to get pushed out of my comfort zone within that combat system a little bit. Yeah.
So important plot beats to get before we get to the end, because the end of this is really interesting. But one memorable one for me is Kratos finally really deals with that boat captain.
Yes.
Like where he had been acknowledged previously in, I can't remember if it was 2018 or Ragnarok, but like he had come up, you know, and Kratos felt bad about it. But in this, he really details, he's like, oh, and I went down into the Hydra's throat, and I really could have helped this guy out, but I didn't, and I kicked him down, and then later he got summoned, and I killed him again. Like, he lays it all out to Mimir, his therapist, and eventually just kind of talks about how he felt bad about it and regrets it, and I, like, you know, one of the funniest recurring bits, and in those original games, I did not think, like, oh gosh, what a thing for Kratos to deal with in therapy. But maybe because of that, I found it very charming that he did.
Yeah. Same. I also liked, what didn't really touch too much on the original games, but I liked Mimir basically commiserating with Kratos about his girlfriend, you know, like it's ultimately what it was. And the one that really cracked me up and that I liked was Mimir was basically like, yeah, I told her I'm not good enough for her, and she got mad at me about that. And Kratos was basically like, yeah, I'm mad at you too, bro. Like, what are you doing? Why are you knocking yourself down a peg? You're great, dude. Like, I think that hearing them have that conversation was really funny. Like hearing Kratos try to build someone up, which admittedly he's like not very good at. It was really fun.
Yeah, when even Kratos is like, oh man, you didn't say that, did you? You did? Ah, come on. You know you've messed up in your relationship.
Text her now.
I also like Mimir described, he was like, you know, she made us a picnic, and of course I can't eat, but like I still really enjoyed the idea of it.
That was good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about a game like this is just the kind of one-off incidental comments that you hear every now and then. And there's one that I thought was pretty cool that I'm not sure if everyone would get because, you know, you're not really sure how they dole these out. But there's one where Kratos asks if Odin ever went to Valhalla. And I think Mimir is like, oh, yeah, he did, but since Valhalla is all about like self-reflection, he couldn't get anything out of it. So he, you know, he didn't,
because he's like too much of a narcissist, right? Wasn't that kind of the conclusion?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Another big thing, another big reference to the old games is the Blade of Olympus is in this game, which is they add, it's essentially a new rage mode that you can punch guys really fast, you can heal, you can do a lot of damage to one enemy, or now you can pull the Blade of Olympus out and start smacking dudes around. And when
was that God of War 2? Is that where he gets that one?
Two and 3, yeah, they are, because ultimately he stabs himself with it in 3, like at the end. I actually thought when he first pulled it out, because we were in this environment from 1, that it was the sword that you get in 1, which is a completely like non-weapon because the blades are so cool, and then you get the sword that is kind of like not good at anything. Yeah. But I just loved, the acknowledgement of like, here is the super powerful weapon from Kratos's past that he's able to kind of summon. Again, I didn't actually use it that much. I didn't think it was as useful as the other rage modes, but I still thought it was really neat.
Yeah. It was just nice to see him holding that, because that was I don't have a sort of encyclopedic knowledge of the first, which someone pointed out in the chat that it's actually 6 games, because I absolutely forgot about Ascension, as everyone does. But because that weapon, and like I said, in God of War 2, I think it's pretty memorable because it's what doesn't Zeus like stab you with it or something in the beginning of the second?
Yeah, because the setup is Zeus is like, hey, you need to put all your power into this weapon. You essentially need to do the Samus thing of losing all your abilities at the beginning of the game, so you can wield this, and then he takes it and stabs you with it.
Yeah, okay, that's my memory was correct then.
Yeah, I also didn't end up using it very much in Valhalla, just because I tried it a couple times and I was like, wait, people can still hit me while I'm using this? I'm gonna switch to one of the other ones where I can't be hit while I'm raging out.
But you have, Kratos he kind of goes through like a greatest hits version of like the things he feels guilty about. Like they discuss Pandora, both the box and the girl.
Yes. Which was, I think, 3. That was the PSP games, right? Wasn't, or was that 3?
No, that was 3. The PSP one is when he has to leave his daughter in like the fields of Elysium or whatever.
Is his daughter Calliope? Is that? Do I have that?
Yeah, that's his daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you get through all the boat captain stuff in this, which is like 3-4 runs, then the next item you pick up at the start is like the flute, which is tied to her, I guess. So I haven't played through those, but it seems like there's definitely some content with him remembering her as well.
Yeah, the PSP ones are big missing ones for me, where I know more or less what happens in the story, but people talk about like that Calliope scene as like a really good emotional part of that original series.
Yeah, have you guys played it, or you're just aware of it? Okay,
I'm just aware.
Just sum it up quickly, because it was really affecting for me when I was young, because I hadn't seen a lot of games do this. Is like maybe it sounds silly to describe, but you literally have to like hold down square to watch a slow motion animation of Kratos like pushing his daughter away.
Oh man. And
it was like, I just hadn't seen that a lot in games. It's like, we're going to connect this ultimately quite emotional moment to like your interactiveness with the game. Like, you're going to have to press a button to make Kratos do this.
Press F to push your daughter away.
It worked, man. Like when I was pretty, no, I guess I wasn't that young. I was probably like, I was early college maybe, but I remember even talking about that moment with friends and being like, that was really affecting,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
think of the boss in MGS3.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that I like about this DLC is I was a little frustrated in the lead up to 2018 that the way they talked about old God of War kind of seemed to be like, well, that was this dumb, kind of macho fantasy, and this one, we're making it smart, we're making it emotional. And I was kind of on the team of like, no, like those games, Kratos was a dumb macho game, but those games were emotional. They really had like interesting thematic things that they were doing.
My argument has always been, which people would be like, and when I say people, who am I referring to? I don't know. The very loud people on the internet, I guess, would be like, Kratos is just this really angry guy. That's his whole character. He's boring. He's just angry. And my argument has always been like, they really explain why he's angry, and he's angry for very good reason. It's not like he's just mad for the sake of being mad. Like, they killed his family and like enslaved him. Like, I understand why he's mad.
Yeah, and I think, I think it's interesting. The course of that, like, those original games is like, the first one, he's pretty understandable. And then, like, by the third one, he is quite literally destroying the world because he is kind of, like, unable to deal with his anger in, like, a more normal way. And I like that they also, like, I think there's even some reference that he's like, this is what Greece looked like after I, like, killed all the gods, because it's like you kill Poseidon and, like, the sea rises, and you kill, other ones, and, like, disease, takes everyone. And so he really messes up Greece.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing, not to dive too much in the original games, but that's like the weird sort of sad ending of 3 is like Kratos is successful. But then you kind of look in the landscape and you're like, are we the baddie here? Like, I don't know if we did the right thing here, which I always appreciated about that game.
So after you beat Tyr, and it happens a couple times, there's this big door, and you're kind of, the first time it's like you can't even open it, or it's like there's kind of a blinding light that comes out and you like can't do it. I assumed that behind that door was going to be, he was going to enter like the room that he killed his family in, which is kind of like the point of origin for Kratos's guilt. But instead, when you ultimately get in there, it is the God of War throne, and it is him from, essentially doing the pose from the end of God of War 1, where he's sitting on the throne, leg crossed, hand supporting his chin. And Kratos delivers a Shakespearean like soliloquy to himself. And like, I am not being kind of ironic when I say that. Like, it is genuinely both in its writing and the way that it is delivered, which, like, God, smacking it out of the park by Christopher Judge. Is that?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he must have read that and been like, yes. This is it. This is my moment.
I was just very moved, where he kind of deals with like, what do I do with this part of my history?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be some kind of super boss, final boss behind that door. And, I think I prefer what it turned out to be, which was the door was him, and, walking through it and seeing himself and delivering that speech is his acceptance of his past life and his vow to just move forward while accepting it.
Also, on just like a arguably like less interesting perspective, it's nice to see the original version of Kratos in like the PS5 visuals.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, cool. They made that whole character model. They shaved the beard, and put him back in the loincloth. I remember reading with the original, I think probably in God of War 2, they were like, Kratos is 8 feet tall and his head is the size of a 4 foot tall man. And it's like that reads in the art style of those games because they were not, drawn particularly realistically. But it's like now when they basically look like real people who are very muscular, how do you adjust that character design? Yeah.
Yeah, it is incredible how much just that beard changes the whole look of the character, who is otherwise very similar.
Yeah.
There was a nice report like about Christopher Judge where he said that like I think there were maybe some plans of like having kind of a discussion between him and old God of War, and he was like, I don't want to be like the MC Carson, I think is his name, like the original voice of Kratos, and I really liked that original Kratos, and I respect that Judge is like, I'm playing a different character, I'm okay kind of taking his part because this Norse Kratos as like, you know, he's very distinct, but like didn't want to kind of like pretend to be a Kratos that he wasn't. I just thought that was like a cool kind of call for him to make. But also I think the Kratos not speaking is actually very evocative, that he's just this kind of like blank canvas that new Kratos is like projecting all of his emotions onto.
He gets up and like moves a little bit, doesn't he? Am I misremembering? Or is he just kind of a almost statue? I genuinely don't remember. It's been a little while now. Do you guys remember?
I don't remember.
Okay,
I think he just sits there. Like he might stand up at one point, but he certainly doesn't. He is basically just like a mannequin.
Yeah, which is fine. I'm not saying like he should have moved, and maybe he did, and I just remember. But like, it was just it's like an age, like you said, Ross. Like it's like you kind of go in there thinking like, oh, something bombastic is going to happen, and it's kind of an atypical video game conclusion to just have a character sort of talking to themselves, but it's really effective. And it like really, it works for the version of Kratos that they've worked hard to sort of create in a, you know, in this new sort of era of him, of like, yeah, he is trying to be self-reflective, and it's like, it's realized in a very literal way at the end of Valhalla in a way that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. And having him literally say the words "God of Hope" could just be a total cheese fest, but somehow I thought it worked in the moment.
Yeah,
it is. He can attach gravitas to lines that no one else in the world, I think, could put that level of like, no, this is meaningful. And
it was weird though when he was like complaining about the Call of Duty campaign length, like in as Kratos. I was a little turned off by that, but
he said your adventures were 12 hours long. Now they're what, 4? I also think, you know, just again, from kind of a narrative perspective, it's like the fighting is the easy part for Kratos. You know, it's like if it was a big final boss, then it would be like, well, obviously he knows how to do this. We know he can stab a guy. But needing him to kind of self-actualize is like the real final boss for Kratos.
Yes.
Are there any other lingering things that we want to talk about in here? Little moments. Eventually, you get the costume where you can play as old God of War, which is
really?
fun. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't unlock that. I admit I got that last scene, and it very much, you know, lets you know you can keep going. There's more to do here if you want. And I had like one lingering trophy. It's funny. With trophies, it's not like I like really go out of my way to get trophies all the time, but like usually at the end of a game I'll check and see like, oh, if there's a couple I can get, I'll go for it. And that Valhalla had a few of those, and one of them was like to fight the most difficult optional boss, but you don't have to beat them, you just have to attempt them. So like I did that.
I was going to ask if you guys had tried the Forum Arena, which is what I think it's called. So it's in the labyrinth, and I had a hard time even finding it because you have to climb up to the second level. And then I believe it is a random pick of one of the 9 berserkers from Ragnarok.
Oh, no, bosses. I didn't get this.
Okay,
yeah.
So if you go up there, you have to fight a randomly selected one of them. And those guys are hard, and I lost, and I was like, oh, I was so powered up, I could have beat this run, but I tried this optional thing, so I never did it again. But those guys are there if you want to fight them.
They're actually,
I don't know what to get for that, but yeah.
It's worth noting in the Greek labyrinth specifically, there are a couple kind of optional arenas because you can fight on like the boat from. Like,
I got that a couple times. Yeah, that's cool.
There are a couple boats because it could be the one from 2018, but it could also be the one from like the very beginning of 1. I mean,
there was no doubt in my mind it was the one from the beginning of 1, because like, even the enemies looked very much like the enemies from that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also there is one where you can fight enemies essentially in like the siren arena from 1, where you have to kill a bunch of sirens to like blow the desert sands away to see Kronos with the temple on his back. But it's just like basically it's just a cool arena to fight people in. But I did like, you know, again, it's like they didn't need to put this in here, but they are really, you know, they're really doing a lot. And it's just like, and this thing is free. It's free.
Yes.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to do. Those arenas are really worth doing if you're trying to like max out a run because they give you a ton of souls or whatever the currency is. And you can, if you do 2 of those, you can open all of those chests that have huge costs.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think, unlike some other roguelikes, I don't think I'm going to go back to this one because I do think the main appeal was the story stuff for me. But like, I don't want to analyze Sony too much. I'm not sure what the marketing strategy is for like spending a year on a really substantial DLC and just dropping it for free. But like, I'm glad they did it. I really enjoyed playing through.
I mean, I made the joke on online, but like, I would have happily paid for this. And what they should have done is just like, when you go to a coffee shop and buy coffee and it has the tip option, like after you pay.
Yes.
They could have just like rolled credits and been like, do you want to give a tip? And I would have been like, yeah, I'll throw you guys some money. They totally could have. Not to encourage publishers to nickel and dime me to death, but like, I'll happily take it free, to be clear. But there was enough here that they really didn't have to.
Yeah, if their marketing goal was to get a max spoilers on God of War, 2 years after it came out, mission accomplished.
Congratulations, Sony Santa Monica, you did it.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to do one for The Last of Us Part 2's roguelike mode, probably. So.
And as we wrap up here, last question. Say in the future of God of War, maybe it's going to be an Atreus game, maybe it's going to be something else. Would you be interested in them remastering that original series? That someone in our chat asked, like, because there's that original Kratos model now, maybe that could serve a purpose beyond this. And I think that'd be pretty fascinating.
Well, it's funny. This was going to be kind of my final thought, which maybe is now a good time to share. But like, people throw around. Totally full disclosure. I love a good remake. I will play the hell out of a remake. I love seeing games that I loved in the past sort of reimagined with new visuals. I eat that up. I'm part of the problem, and that has certainly been kicked around for God of War 1. And my thought has always been like, yeah, I'd love to like go revisit that game with new visuals. That'd be fun. But like, I think that this DLC basically satiated me for that. And I'm at a point now where even though I would absolutely buy it and play it, I really don't want a remake of the original God of War because I like how it functions in concert with the 2018 game in Valhalla as like this old thing that looks kind of weird in your memory and like was very much of the era. Like, I don't know if I need to see it with PS5 visuals and like PS5 performances and PS5 writing. Honestly, like, I kind of like that it's this like anarchic kind of violent old game where you just play an evil angry guy. Like, don't, if they remade it, I feel like they would have to sort of like bring up the writing and emotion of the game, and I feel like that would almost hurt the 2018 game in Valhalla in a weird way. But this totally satisfied my desire to like see some of those old areas with new visuals, relive some of those moments, like putting the guy in the cage. Like, it was enough for me to feel like what I would have gotten out of a remake of God of War 1, I got from Valhalla, and I'm satisfied. But that being said, if it does come to exist, I'll still play it because, like I said, I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm fine with those old games staying in like the realm of myth, which is kind of what they serve to the story. And Valhalla was all about like reckoning with the past and preparing to move forward. So I'm happy just moving forward from this point.
Yeah, I think it would be weird to see 4K 60 FPS Kratos be as kind of emotionally stunted as he is in God of War 1. It would be like, what a regression. Look at him. He couldn't talk to people.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, God of War Valhalla, we all really enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to this Max Spoilers, and check out everything else MinnMax is doing.
Great job, Jacob. You're doing it. You're killing it.
Yeah,
We got the bonus
God,
pod
Ben,
every
you're
single
all
Monday.
Zeus.
Here we go. Patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Unlock that bonus podcast feed. We got the deepest dive on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth coming up. We did the deepest dive on God of War Ragnarok. If you want to hear us talk more about that. The deepest dive on Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. If you want to hear more Ross. Ross, thoughts on the Great Circle trailer?
Ooh, I got real excited for it, and the Troy Baker's doing that voice.
Yeah.
It sounded great. Incredible.
It's, you know what? I went back and look, we'll end this soon, I swear. But I went back.
Words,
and
great, incredible.
I went back and watched that trailer again and again. Like,
good, solid, maybe.
it's so bizarre if you listen to it because all the clips from like in-game cinematics with him, it sounds like Troy Baker. But like the VO for the trailer sounds like 70% Harrison Ford, 30% Troy Baker. And then like for everything else, it's flipped. So I don't know if he just rehearsed that down pat or there was a little AI fudging for the VO, but the VO is like weirdly spot on. If you go back, there's a weird divide, you know what I'm saying, between the trailer VO and the gameplay VO. But yeah, also,
I just want to say that I trust machine games with stories about punching Nazis. That's my main takeaway.
That's a good point.
yeah.
And this trailer promised a lot of Nazi punching.
To the beat, which I hope that's a whole component.
Yes.
If you punch him on the Indiana Jones theme as it's playing constantly, you get a little bonus as you rack
Build
them
that
up.
combo.
Okay, anyways, thanks for watching. That was Max Spoilers, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Did you know that you can more than double the amount of podcasts from MinnMax every single week by supporting us at the $5 tier on Patreon? You don't have to listen through the browser or anything dumb like that. You'll get access to a private RSS feed if you support us on Patreon. You put it in your favorite podcast app, and then bam, you can listen to our weekly bonus podcast Party Chat, the podcast versions of The Deepest Dives, MinnMax interviews, Max spoilers, and you get the MinnMax Show podcast a day earlier than everybody else. So please help support independent games media. Head over to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's.